Welcome to Old Iron Machine Works. I'm kind of been a little late here getting another video out, so let's just get right into it. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you might have seen me where I machine these big cones, and what they do is they bolt right up to a big turbocharger. And here's one that I've already machined and put on it. And I did a video removing a bunch of broken studs on the turbo also, but right there where I'm pointing are these cones that bolt to the turbo. And then they just have all the insulation to try to keep the heat out of the building, which makes everything extremely hard. And here you can see how hard it is. I'm going to go over it with the grinder, and where I hit the top surface of that scale with the grinder, it doesn't really do anything. The only way you can remove it is once you get an edge there, the stone actually grabs it and flakes it off. But you can see when I take it over the top of the scaling, it doesn't really do a whole lot. So it's more about just grabbing the edge and peeling it off. The first one I did, I put it in the lathe like that, and of course I kept knocking the tip of the carbide off. So I kind of learned real quick, let's grind it off before we get after it. Now the whole purpose in doing this is when they get a Recon engine, they come with Recon turbos also. And what they have is just a metal-to-metal fit. There's no gaskets or anything. So they just want two really nice, good surfaces. And here I got it on the big lathe at home. And in one of my previous videos, I showed the big 6-jaw chuck that I put on the lathe that I restored. The chuck was pretty much a new chuck, just needed cleaned up. And then what I did here is I just pulled 3 of the top jaws and just moved 3 of them out, and that was more than enough to grab the inside of that flange. And here I got it all clamped up, ready to go. Now on these bales, they've always kind of rang where you had to be really careful trying to get a good finish on them without chattering. And I've had a lot of this Sylomer, and the Sylomer is basically designed for vibration isolation, and they are used underneath a lot of the big Yenbacher engines that we deal with. And when the engines get swapped out, of course, they put new material under them. And you'll see here in the next clip, full skid with the generator, gearbox, and engine. And that whole setup sits on top of the Sylomer. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to try wrapping that around one of the bells, see if I can deaden it a little bit, and see what happens. And it actually ended up working out really nice. And here's the finish, which is I'm very happy with it. It'll be just fine where it bolts right up to the turbo. So this job here is pretty well done, ready to come out of the lathe. Okay, on this next job, let me start out by saying that the company I work for, nor I, were involved with setting this gearbox, but it did have an issue. It looks like some bolts came loose, and you can see the one bolt broke. And over here, you can see in the far left corner there, one of the adjuster pads that bolted the side broke the bolts off, you know, when it came loose. And it pulled some threads there, so we just stacked some washers and put a new bolt just to torque up, make sure it pulls up the torque. But I was asked if there was any way that I could clean up the surfaces on the bolt holes. So here I'm showing you know, my attempt of building a little portable surface grinder that I can take out in the field and clean those holes up. And what we have here is I'm simulating, right there's the bolt hole, and I got that 2-inch piece of tubing clamped to some shims that duplicate the thickness of the gearbox, and then that old plate I got underneath there will just clamp to the bottom of the gearbox, and away we go. Anyway, normally when I build something, I just start grabbing whatever I can and go from there. So this is just an attempt of my my Milwaukee home-built surface grinder. Now where I'm marking it right there, the holes on the main bottom piece are not centered. So I just took the material and just kind of roughing out, just kind of eyeballing some lines. And then I'll just take the square, make some lines. And then what I'll do is I just took a piece of paper, set it over the bolt pattern, and just with a little ball peen tap the holes perfect. And then what I'll do is just center those over the marks I'm putting right now, and then just center punch it, and close enough. I know the camera is at a slight angle, but actually 3 of the holes came out where they were pretty gosh darn close to center. That one right there was slightly off, so I just had to fudge over a little bit. Here, since I have 2 layers of material in the vise, I just run a piece of nylon on it just so it makes sure it tightens both pieces up. Now some may wonder why I made that bottom plate so thick, and it was kind of by design. It's 4 inches wide, and I really wanted the weight. I thought the weight would actually help with what I'm building and help maybe keep the chatter down. That's the reason I went with the that thicker plate. And then what we got there is the top adjusting bolt will be for adjusting the angle of the grinder. Here I got it tacked up, and 2 bolts in the side. And then when it's all done, that top bolt will be a threaded bolt all the way, which I've already got it in there. And then there's just a nut on the top and the bottom of that top plate for setting the angle. And this thing's just going to slide back and forth on shims, and then I pull out whatever shims I decide to pull out, you know, when I start grinding. And you can see the bolts there, those washers, see how they're cupped? Those bolt holes are much larger than the bolts by design, because you have to be able to move the gearbox around. But what's happening is those washers are just bending and forming right into that hole. And when you move the gearbox over, as soon as you tighten the bolt up, it wants to twist the bolt off to the side. So what I'm doing here, here's my fancy homemade grinder. I want to get flat surfaces back. We're going to run much thicker washers, and that way when they move the gearbox for alignment, as soon as they tighten the bolt down, and the bolt's torqued about 550 pounds, the bolts are going to pull straight down. They're not going to want to cock the head of the bolt over and put it in a stressed position. But anyway, here very patiently, it would have been nice to have more horsepower, more aggressive wheel, but for what we were doing, it ended up doing a nice job. Now in the future, I may play around with making some of my own washers, but these are the ones the customer got. You can see the dish in it, and that washer will flatten down. Once you tighten it 550 pounds, it's going to tighten all the way down. And what we want to have a flat surface all the way to the edge of the bolt hole, just so when it does torque down, the bolt stays nice and straight, doesn't want to cock off to the side. And so for this one, I think it's going to work out pretty nice. There, that little edge right there, I just took a rat tail file and knocked it off. Okay, here we got the gearbox back into place. We got the drive hub bolted up, so we can make sure the alignment will be fine, and we don't want it to be bolt bound, which means when the gearbox is lined up, you want to have clearance between the hole and the bolt. If you don't have clearance, then you got to move the hub. But anyway, this job for me is done. Now this brings us to this portion of the video, and I need to warn you right now, there is no more machining involved. From now, it's going to be probably like 15 minutes of them clearing trees right next to the property I work at. A company was hired to come in and remove and chip up a whole bunch of eucalyptus trees. When I originally talked to the guy the first day running the excavator, I had it set up where me and a close friend were going to start bringing trailers in, and he was going to take the excavator and start loading up some of the big wood right on the trailers, and we were just going to stockpile it on my friend's ranch. But The next morning, the gentleman running the excavator said his boss kind of shut it down because of liability. They couldn't let anybody go out there and start cutting or taking any wood, you know. So anyway, everything all gets pushed over, dug out, and put through a big shredder and chipped up. So if you don't find tree removal interesting at all, you may want to just go ahead and exit the video now. There, you've been warned. Here we're just outside of Rio Vista, which we have a lot of wind turbines. And one thing about wind turbines, they're definitely known for being really environmentally friendly. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my videos. If you like this kind of content and you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. Thumbs up are always appreciated. Comments are appreciated. And once again, I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel.